This message comes from Mint Mobile. If you're tired of spending hundreds on big wireless bills, bogus fees, and free perks, Mint Mobile is for you. Shop plans at mintmobile.com/switch. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
This is America in Pursuit, a limited-run series from NPR and Throughline. I'm Randa Abdel-Fattah. Each week, we bring you stories about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in the U.S. that began 250 years ago.
The date was February 21st. It was a Sunday.
This is the voice of Yuri Kochiyama in an archive recording about the fateful day in 1965 when civil rights activist Malcolm X was assassinated.
Assalamu alaikum. How do you feel? Who do we want to hear? Are we going to bring him on?
Yuri was there when there was a distraction in the audience.
And just then the gunfire went off and his hand was up. I remember this. I turned around quickly, and the next thing I saw was Malcolm falling back in a dead faint.
Yuri ran up to Malcolm X
And picked up his head and just put it on my lap.
At that moment, someone snapped a photo. Yuri is dressed in all black, kneeling on the ground, her back hunched over Malcolm, her hands holding up his head, and her eyes pointed down at his face. And he's in her arms, eyes closed, wounds exposed, white shirt stained with blood. This photo is an enduring image of Yuri Kochiyama. But why was she there? And how did she become an active member of the civil rights struggle of the 1960s and beyond? Today on the show, the story of Yuri Kochiyama and how her experience of Japanese internment during World War II catapulted her into a lifelong fight for social justice and a more just vision of America. That's coming up after a quick break.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Carvana, making buying a car 100% online with real, transparent pricing and customizable financing that fits your budget. Browse thousands of cars and get yours delivered. Visit Carvana.com today. Delivery fees and terms may apply. This message comes from Lisa. From night one, you'll feel the difference. Premium materials that deliver serious comfort and full-body support. Go to Lisa.com for 30% off mattresses, plus get an extra $50 off with promo code NPR. This message comes from Thumbtack. Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews all on the app. Download today.
This message comes from Side Door, a podcast from the Smithsonian. Host Lizzie Peabody sneaks you behind the scenes of the nation's largest museum to discover stories of history, science, art, and culture. Subscribe to Side Door wherever you get your podcasts.
December 7th, 1941.
December 7th is a date
A date which will live
we won't forget.
in infamy.
On December 7th, 1941, at 7:55 a.m., Japan attacked Pearl Harbor.
And within hours, Yuri's family, the Nakaharas, got a knock on their door.
3 guys walked in. I didn't know what they were till later, but it was FBI. They asked if Mr. Nakahara lived there. I said, oh yeah, but he just came home from the hospital and he's sleeping in the back.
He had ulcer surgery.
They didn't say anything. They just went in the house, went to the back, woke up my father and said, put on your bathrobe and slippers, I guess. And they took him away just like that.
Yuri's father is detained. And this happened to 2,000 or 3,000 Japanese American immigrant men in particular, who were picked up after the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
We were calling each other up saying, did anyone come to your house yet? Some of the people said yes, some said no, but they all had heard over the radio that Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. So we said, oh my God, we're all going to be in trouble.
5 weeks went by before Yuri was allowed to visit her father. A week later, he was released. But just one day after returning home, he died, perhaps from being moved so soon after his surgery.
When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, our west coast became a potential combat zone. Living in that zone were more than 100,000 persons of Japanese ancestry. Military authorities therefore determined that all of them would have to move.
Before long, Yuri, who was 20 years old at this point, along with her family and many other Japanese people, were forced to leave their homes, their fates unknown.
There were some people on the street who had signs saying, we're sorry to see you go, you Japanese go. But there were also people who had signs to say, get out, Japs. The hysteria of war was really high.
The relocation centers are supervised by the War Relocation Authority in unsettled parts of California, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, and Arkansas.
It helped her to recognize herself as a Japanese American. This is what Yuri says. And to see the strength of the Japanese American community and to survive as not just individuals, but to come together as community. People grew gardens, right? They figured out how to put up partitions in the bathrooms to have a little privacy and dignity. There was great protest inside the concentration camps. She talked to a lot of people inside the camps. She listened to discussions of more politicized Japanese Americans inside the camps. And I would say she started to grow a social consciousness, a sense that problems in the United States had social and structural origins.
We always called the camps relocation centers while we were there. Now, it feels apropos to call them concentration camps.
And when people say, well, doesn't that diminish what happened in Nazi Germany? The response has been that those were death camps. But these that Yuri and Japanese Americans were placed in were concentration camps. There was barbed wire, there were sentries, they were forced to be placed into them. Their freedoms were limited.
120,000 Japanese Americans were detained during World War II. Yuri spent 2 years living in a camp. And that experience forever changed the way she viewed the U.S. and its history.
Even if you took history in school, I don't think we learned very much of anything.
Historically, Americans have always been putting people behind walls. First, there were the American Indians who were put on reservations, Africans in slavery on plantations, Chicanos doing migratory work, and even to the Chinese when they worked on the railroad camps.
You're taught what a good country America is, and it does so much good to the world and all that crap. I believed it wholeheartedly. And suddenly, for the first time, I felt something different.
Yuri's family was imprisoned in internment camps until the end of the war in 1945. But the experience and what she had learned there stayed with her. 5 years later, when the U.S. entered war with Korea, Yuri was married to Bill Kochiyama, a World War II vet who she'd met at one of the internment camps. Now she and Bill were living in New York and in search of community.
In New York, there was not a large Japanese American community, and so there wasn't a ready Japanese American or Asian American activist community to plug into. And in some ways, Yuri and her husband Bill were doing that work. They're supporting, Asian Americans en route to the Korean War, right?
Hosting gatherings at their home, giving soldiers a sense of camaraderie.
This is, people would call it community activism.
The first place I worked in New York was chock full of nuts. Very famous restaurant. And I got a job as a, waitress. I loved that job. And it was the first time I'm working with just black people. Two of the guys were from the South. And so I mentioned to them that I lived a year and a half in Mississippi and at USO, which is Service Everybody.
USO stands for the United Service Organizations, a nonprofit that provides live entertainment to soldiers and their families.
But no black soldiers came in. And so they said, what was the address? I gave the address. I couldn't forget 222 Pine. They said, that's the main drag. No black soldiers, even wearing a uniform, can go in anywhere on the main drag. I was shocked. Then I got really interested and wanted to find out everything I could about what black people have gone through. And it made me ashamed when I could think of Asians who were just as racist as whites, towards blacks anyway.
It was experiences like that, talking to coworkers and neighbors who were black and Puerto Rican, that began to educate Yuri about the deep roots of segregation and racism in America.
The sickness and ugliness of racism was exposed to the entire nation and to the rest of the world as well.
We will meet your physical force with soul force.
She started to invite civil rights activists. She was quite unusual. She would just see people announced in the newspaper that there were speakers coming through town, and she would call up Columbia University and invite them to her home. And she was always also so extraordinarily modest, and she just did this to try to get exposed and get the people around her exposed, right?
She also began getting involved in the labor movement.
Racism is something that it seemed like all people of color, if not people of color, it would be poor people, have gone through, that this country is not only race conscious, but class conscious.
Meanwhile, Yuri's family was growing.
She became an activist and an organizer in her 40s as the mother of 6 children.
Wow.
Right?
By the time I had 6 kids, we had to move to a larger apartment. And, we were living in the housing project, low-income housing, and they were building a new low-income housing in Harlem.
So her family moves to Harlem in 1960. She tells a hilarious story of how they carried their whole life, their whole apartment full of stuff on the subway back and forth multiple times from Midtown Manhattan to New York, to Harlem.
Gee, Harlem, activism, Harlem was the place to go.
She was really primed when she moved to Harlem to get involved after the growth in her political consciousness during the 50s, right? And the activism around her in Harlem is mostly in the Black movement. She got involved in supporting better quality schools for the children of Harlem, right? Now including her own children. And then she got involved in a labor struggle at a medical site where they were going to build a new medical building and were doing their typical, discrimination in hiring.
During the summer of '63, it was a fight for jobs for Black and Puerto Ricans.
CORE had organized this, the Congress on Racial Equality, to demand jobs for Black and Puerto Rican construction workers. And, some of what they were doing was putting their bodies on the line to block the entry of construction trucks onto the site and to slow down the work. And Yuri did that. And she got arrested. She was one of more than 600 arrested.
The hearings started after the summer. And one day, Malcolm walked through the door.
Malcolm X. You know, he was this monumental figure, especially in Harlem, right, where he was based. And in the Black community, you know, people greatly admired him. Not everyone agreed with him, but he was a force to be reckoned with.
All the Black activists all ran over to Malcolm and circled him. They were shaking hands with him. I thought, gee, I want to shake his hands too, you know. But I thought, gee, maybe it's not right for me because I'm not Black, and somebody's not going to like that, you know, wondering why Asian wants to do that. And I said, doggone it, I'm going to shake his hand.
And she did shake his hand.
And then I said something very stupid. I mean, I said, I admire what you're doing, but I don't agree with you about everything. And he said, well, what don't you agree with me about? And I said, your harsh stand on integration. And he said, well, I don't have time to talk to you. But he said, if you're really interested, he said, you could call my secretary and make an appointment.
After her chance meeting with Malcolm X, Yuri decided to write him a letter to clarify what she meant when she'd said, your harsh stand on integration.
She says, if people could show their true dedication to Black liberation or to racial justice, could you then accept the togetherness of all people? So even though she always had a vision for the togetherness of all people, she was even then recognizing that the blame didn't reside within Black people who wanted autonomous spaces, but in folks who exhibited anti-Black racism, and that they were the ones who needed to change before all people could come together.
In other words, Yuri thought integration could be the key to bringing people together through nonviolence. And in order for it to happen, non-Black Americans first had to recognize that they were the problem. Malcolm X seemed receptive to her feedback.
He invites her to attend his Organization of Afro-American Unity, newly formed after he left the Nation of Islam, the OAAU's Liberation School. And Yuri joins and studies, and it transforms her life.
I feel that Malcolm did more than anyone else to let me see what's really happening in the world and why.
They talked about Black liberation in the U.S., but also connected the dots between freedom struggles all around the world.
He absolutely was for Black liberation. That was front and foremost for him. And he was also an internationalist and a third worldist. When he talked to the Hiroshima atomic bomb survivors in the Kochiyamas' home in 1964, he said to them, right, you have been bombed and you bear the scars of the bombs. And we too, as Black Americans in the United States, also bear the scars of bombs. So he was constantly making these connections in large scale.
Well, I think the Black liberation movement had an influence on every movement because they were really more advanced. And I think all the other movements sort of followed suit, knowing what racism has done to this country and this feeling of white superiority that has spread all over the world.
Yuri kept organizing well after Malcolm X's assassination in 1965, up until 2014, when she died at the age of 93. She was involved in Asian Americans for Action, fighting for reparations for Japanese American incarceration. And she found connections between the Asian American struggle and the struggles of other groups. She protested and organized alongside the Young Lords, a group fighting for self-determination for Puerto Ricans and colonized people. She lobbied for the release of political prisoners. And in the aftermath of 9/11, she spoke out against the racial profiling of Muslim Americans.
Yuri Kochiyama always said and operated by the ethos that my people's liberation is intricately linked to your people's liberation, right? I cannot be free if you're not free. We need to think about how things impact the most vulnerable among us, right? And work out of those best interests.
That's it for this week's episode of America in Pursuit. If you want to hear the full story about the life of Yuri Kochiyama, check out the episode, Our Own People. And join us next week as we turn to the civil rights movement of the 1960s.
It was unimaginable to see 200,000 people anywhere at that time. Looking out at that crowd from a small town in Mississippi, I have this kind of feeling that comes up in me, a sense of awe and pride and so on. It feels a certain way, and I still get it. I remember thinking very clearly that they support us. They support us.
The March on Washington and the man behind it all. That's next week. Don't miss it. This episode was produced by Kiana Moghadam and edited by Christina Kim with help from the Throughline production team. Music by Ramtin Arablouei and his band Drop Electric. Special thanks to Julie Kane, Irene Noguchi, Beth Donovan, Casey Miner, and Lindsay McKenna. I'm Rand Abdel Fattah. Thanks for listening.
This message comes from Bombas. Upgrade your summer staples with soft socks, cushy sandals, and breezy basics. One purchase means one donated, with over 200 million donations and counting. Go to bombas.com/NPR and use code NPR for 20% off your first purchase. This message comes from Grainger. For the ones who get it done, Grainger offers the professional-grade products you need to get the job done. With fast delivery and access to technical product experts ready to help you meet any challenge. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. This message comes from Thumbtack. Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews all on the app. Download today.